Now, in addition to learning specific bass riffs, there will come a time where you go to a gig and there's 30 or 40 tunes that you don't know. You think, how am I going to get through this? The answer is you get through it by being able to just negotiate a chord chart. So you have bars with letters in G and then C and A and D. So if you know where they all are on the bass, technically you could go to a gig and play for 24 hours straight if you know where your notes are, because you just read the chord charts. It can be a very rewarding experience, as well as a hair-raising one if you're not quite sure how the tune goes. So on the bass we have an E string. That's the lowest note on the bass, is an E. If I put my index finger at 1st fret, I get F. Then I get G at 3rd, A at 5th, B at 7, C at 3rd fret on the next string, D at 5th, and E at 7th. So, from one E to the next E. Because of the way music works, it's a repeating pattern all the way up. There are only 7 letters in music, so that you just go E, E, and an E at the top. It's actually that fret, but it doesn't work. So, all of the notes in between, it follows the same laws whatever octave you're in. So, notice also that because of the way that the bass strings are tuned, if I have a B here, which is at 7th fret, I get the same note at 2nd fret on the next string. That's really important, so you're not having to race all the way up and down the neck. You can actually get things to sit under the fingers. Don't forget, this is designed by a human being for another one to play. So it's going to have areas that make it easier for somebody to play stuff. So we've got E and F, and B and C. Now, these are the ones whose positions are absolutely next to each other. C and D have a gap between. That's because on the keyboard, B and C, these two here, have no black note between them, and E and F also don't have a black note in between them. Makes it easier because you can see a pattern of 3, 2, 3, 2, 3 on the keyboard, and this essentially do the same job in slightly different ways. Music theory wise, they are the same. So, E to F and B to C are right next to each other. But things like C and D and E, G, A, F, G, have a gap between. Now these represent the black notes on here. They are sharps and flats. Okay. And the answer is, as a musician, you have to be able to recognise both things. That note there is an F sharp or a G flat. Which one it is printed on paper there'll be all sorts of theoretical reasons, and I'm not going to go into those because I would bore you to tears. So, F sharp or G flat, G sharp or A flat. Now, rather than learning those, if you think that a flat is 1 fret that way and a sharp is 1 fret this way, that's often easier to remember, especially when you're trying to get the positions of your natural notes. So, looking at a song, let's have a look at Sweet Home Alabama. There's 3 chords in that song, which are D, C, and G. So D is at 5th fret on the A string, C is at 3rd fret on the A string, and G is on the E string at 3rd fret. The rhythm you would get more from listening to the record. So in a way, when you are doing a gig, you should really listen to the song to get the idea of what it's rhythmically doing, but you don't necessarily need to sit down and tab out all the chords. If somebody's giving you a chord sequence, Sweet Home Alabama, D, C, G, that's all you need to know, and then you can impart what you've heard from the record onto that chord sequence. It's a very good way of doing it, to use your eyes and ears rather than just literally head down in a music stand for the entire gig. If you sort of know how it goes in terms of its sort of general feel, that's a better way of doing it, because also you need to communicate with drummer, guitarist, singer. You know, if there's going to be another chorus, the guitarist might mouth the word chorus across the stage. If you haven't seen, it's a bit of a shame. So something like Sitting on the Dock of the Bay is a little bit more complicated. There's a few more chords, but the idea is the same. G, B, C, A. G, B, C, A. I got the rhythm and the tempo from listening to it. Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes. As a bass player, if you get those notes really solidly delivered in a rhythmic sense and good tone, you'll get called for gigs that just people say, oh, can you do this, can you do that? They don't want something like this, sitting in the morning sun. Don't want any complicated stuff like that, because it detracts from what the song should be about. Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes. It's a peaceful tune, watching the ships roll in and I watch them roll away again. As a bass player, you've got to play for those words, and if you're wandering about, it kind of if you're playing it more complicated than it needs to be, it really does take the sting out of what those words are. Something like the intro to Don't Stop Me Now by Queen. Tonight, F, I'm gonna have my A, self a real D, good time, I feel a G, I C. There we go. Very often, if you're at a gig and you're being dictated the chords, you'll be given them in advance. A, D, G, C. If you're given two chords in quick succession, usually it's going to be that you're going to have half a bar on each chord. So tonight, A, D, G, C, F. So generally, when somebody is delivering chords to you, you would assume that the chord change is going to be on the next bar. Usually in 4/4 time. It's called common time. Basically, most rock and pop music is in 4. Very, there's a few that aren't. So you'll be given chords that, and if it's something that isn't on one of those beats, it might go wrong the first time, but you just have to clock what happened. For example, Sweet Home Alabama has got a C at the end. D, C, G, C. It's got that little push, but once you've heard that once, you can sort of try and remember that. D, C, G, C, D. So you just get through once. Maybe it's not quite right the first time, but it'll be right on subsequent occasions. It's really good musical training and deeply satisfying. When you're driving home after a gig where you've played 45, 50 tunes that you've never played before, but you got through, it's a mark of musicianship, of lots and lots of listening and full concentration, and it can be really, really rewarding. So there is just using the natural notes. If I'm going to do something like Bohemian Rhapsody, people go, oh, that's a really complicated song, I don't know if I can do that. All you need to know is for the first sort of 3 or 4 minutes of the song, the mama's killed the man, gone against his head, pulled my trigger nose down. It's just single notes. So starting off with a B flat. B is a 2nd fret. B flat is 1 that way. There's B flat. So mama, G, just kill the man, C, put a gun against his head, C, F, trigger now he's dead, B flat. Mama, G, I've just begun, C, B, B flat, A. So it can get a little bit more complicated there, but once you've, if you've listened to the song before, you can think, oh yeah, there's a few more things going on there. E flat, D, C, D, F, Didn't mean to make you cry. B flat. I'm back again. E flat. Time tomorrow. D. C. A flat. E flat. It's a bit more going on there, but the principle is the same. You could dictate that. You could get that from somebody just shouting chords at you. Sometimes, though, the bass player doesn't play the root note. So if the chord is G or G minor, you'd play a G. Notice also, minor doesn't mean flat. That's a very common mistake to make. G and G minor both mean G for the bass player. So G or G minor. They are happy and sad sounding chords, G and G minor. But the note at the bottom is the same. But you might have an F. On a bit of music, you might have F over A. You think, well, what does that mean? Does that mean play two chords in the same bar, or play two chords at once? The answer is the top one, F, is keyboards, guitar. A is for the bass player. So it could be an F chord, which you usually have an F for. However, you could have this. You could have a different note in the bass. So watch out for that. Confusingly, in printed music, you have F/A. And you think, well, for piano, that would be A in the left hand, but it's on the right. F over A. So watch out for that. It's everything underneath the sort of forward slash, if you like, is for the bass. Everything to the above it is chords that work for everyone else. So your best bet is to try and go to a jam night with your bass and just get there with a couple of chord charts, or go there with a view to playing some tunes where somebody just mouths chords at you. It's really good practice, and actually you would find that you can play 20,000 songs just by knowing where your notes are on the bass.